right, we're still on question 1 from Boo Boo, and we now got to 1B. And 1B is sentences. Now, Boo Boo's asked for compound and complex, but let's start with simple. I have chosen a sentence from an essay by Bessie Head, which is set in the short story book called Changes, the anthology of short stories. And again, I'm not suggesting that everybody's doing the short stories, but you might like to look at this. It's actually very nice, okay? It's a good essay. We start with a simple sentence. Poverty has a home in Africa, Bessie Head says. Finite verb. Hope we're all doing this, not just me. Once you've found your finite verb, you need to decide on how many clauses you've got. We have one finite verb, which means one clause. Why? Because by definition, a clause has a subject and a finite verb. So one finite verb, one subject, one clause. If a sentence has only one clause, it is called a simple sentence. Are we okay? All right, so this is the beginning. It's called Village People. She says, poverty has a home in Africa, like a quiet second skin. So what I did is I turned that into my own sentence, but this is not Bessie Head. Poverty is like a quiet second skin. What is the finite verb? How many students forget that is a finite verb? Is like here a verb? No, it's a preposition. So we've got one finite verb, which means how many clauses? Which means what kind of sentence have we got? Is everybody okay? All right, so we go back to the Bessie Head passage. I just want to read it to you before we mangle it in our clause analysis. She says, so remember, poverty has a home in Africa, like a quiet second skin. It may be the only place on earth where it is worn with an unconscious dignity, poverty. People do not look down at your shoes, which are caked with years of mud and split so that the toes stick out. They look straight and deeply into your eyes to see if you are friend or foe. That is all that matters. To some extent, I think this eye-looking, this intense human awareness is a reflection of the earth all about. It's a beautiful opening, you must admit. Very challenging. The idea of poverty in Africa, and you might want to consider the way that other continents view the African continent. But the fact that she starts with poverty, and she tells the most amazing story in this. Even if you are not studying the short stories, may I recommend that you do read that essay called Village People. Okay, but I have used it for my lesson. All right, it may be where this it, so we've just read the passage, you know, is Africa, may be where it, and you know that that means poverty. All right, it may be where it is worn with an unconscious dignity. Finite verbs? Are we all doing this? You're not just leaving it to me to do it. Don't forget that is a finite verb. May be is a finite verb. So how many finite verbs have we got? How many clauses? Are we all okay? Do we all understand that? So what links the clauses? Either you've got a simple sentence with a full stop and another simple sentence, and you've got a finite verb and a finite verb, or you've got a sentence with your two finite verbs and you've got a conjunction joining them. So go looking for the conjunction. When you've found it, put a wavy line under it. And put a round bracket, open a round bracket in front of it. Are we all together? Where does the where clause end? Square bracket off everything else. Your square bracket is your main clause. The round bracket is a subordinate or dependent clause. I say subordinate because that's how I was taught. It's a subordinate clause. So what we've got is we've got one main clause and we have one subordinate clause. And that equals a complex sentence. You can have more than one subordinate clauses, but you've got to have one main clause and subordinate clauses, and that will give you a complex sentence. Just learn it. Learn the definition. All right, now I took the sentence that I read to you and I rewrote it to give me this sentence. Start by finding the finite verbs. Underline them with a straight line. Count the number of finite verbs. How many clauses do we have? And either there's a full stop between them or there is a conjunction. Find the conjunction. Underline it with a wavy line and stop. Because now we need to ask the question, is this a co-ordinating or a subordinating conjunction? Okay. Now, most primary school teachers teach co-ordinating conjunctions by using a mnemonic. And the one that primary school teachers like to use Did you get all of that? Now, what is the significance of a coordinating conjunction? Co means the same as, like colleagues who work with each other. It means with. Co-ordinating conjunctions can join words or phrases or clauses, but they must be of equal value. So if I say, I'm joining the two nouns and they are of equal value. If I say, then the conjunction is joining two phrases. They are of equal value. Are we okay? Are we following that? So if you come back here, is and joining words or phrases or clauses here? It's joining clauses. So this is the second main clause. So you square bracket it. We have two main clauses. We have a compound sentence. Is that clear? Are we okay with that? Right, can we continue with Bessie Head? This is her essay on poverty, which I read to you. She says, people do not look down at your shoes, which are caked with years of mud and split so that the toes stick out. Find the finite verbs. I'll accept the not as part of the finite verb. I'm not going to fight you on that. So we've got two finite verbs, which means we've got how many clauses? Which means we've got how many conjunctions? Are we sure that we've got all the finite verbs? So how many finite verbs do we have? So how many clauses do we have? So how many conjunctions? Right, so what I'm driving at is go on looking for the finite verbs. It's really important that you get your finite verbs. Once you've got your finite verbs, you know how many clauses you've got. You know how many conjunctions you are looking for. Now, be careful. Find your conjunctions. Now, what's worrying me is that some of you will have gone for this. You can only say that that and is joining the clause if you add in here and which are split. If you do that, then you've got another clause. Otherwise, this is just saying caked and split. So if you want this to be the full clause, you must put it in the way we did before. Otherwise, we've got this one and that one, and we square bracket off this one. But what is interesting is when you look at this, you think, yes, actually, this is a second clause because it's understood which are caked with years of mud and which are split. And then this and is joining this clause to that clause, and they're both subordinate clauses. So we've still only got one main clause and subordinate clauses. You've got to be very careful with and. Let's look at the next one. They look straight and deeply into your eyes to see if you are friend or foe. Finite verbs. Be careful, to see is not a finite verb. It's an infinitive. Two finite verbs, two clauses, one conjunction. What am I worried about again? You're going to go for this one. What have we got? They look straight and deeply. And is joining straight to deeply. It is joining words. It is not joining the clauses. There's the conjunction. Right, so what we've had on this page is a main clause and then either one or more subordinate clauses. We are looking at complex sentences. Going on with her passage, that is all that matters. Finite verb. One finite verb. Are we sure? No, there's a second finite verb. Two finite verbs. Two clauses. Lovely. Conjunction. To some extent, I think that this eye-looking, this intense human awareness is a reflection of the earth all about. Finite verbs. Check. So we seem to have two finite verbs, two clauses. Two clauses, one conjunction. Where is it? Right, so how are we going to bracket off this one? Is that a subordinating or a coordinating conjunction? It's sub, so there. Where does the that clause end? There. So to some extent, I think main clause. I think what? That this eye-looking, this intense human awareness is a reflection of the earth all about. Subordinate clause. What kind of sentence? We've got one main clause and one subordinate clause. We've got a complex sentence. Right, let's look at the last little bit. There's no end to African sky and to African land. Finite verb is just the one. There is no end to African sky and to African land, yes. So what about this conjunction? We've been talking about the conjunctions. What about this conjunction? Well, it's joining African sky to, actually it's joining to African sky, to African land. It's joining those phrases. It is not joining clauses. So we've got one finite verb. It is a simple sentence. One might say that in its vastness is a certain kind of watchfulness that strips man down to his simplest form. Once again, finite verbs. 3 finite verbs, 3 clauses. Check again. Okay, if we've got 3 clauses, we need 2 conjunctions. What are they? That, subordinating or coordinating conjunction. Sub, round bracket. Where does this that clause end? That in its vastness is a certain kind of watchfulness, close bracket, that strips man down to his simplest form, close bracket. We've got 1 main clause, there it is, square bracket off everything else, and 2 subordinate clauses. We've got a complex sentence. Right, last little bit, deep breath. Let's see if we can just get this right. If that is not so, then there must be some other unfathomable reason for the immense humanity and the extreme gentleness of the people of my village. Again, a wonderful sentence. Finite verbs. If that is not so, then there must be some other unfathomable reason for the immense humanity and the extreme gentleness of the people of my village. So we seem to have 2 finite verbs, which would mean how many clauses? Which would mean how many conjunctions? Go looking for the conjunctions. Now, I am worried that you're going to look at and here, but it's joining the immense humanity to the extreme gentleness. It's joining phrases, not clauses. We haven't yet looked at the fact that a sentence can begin with a subordinating conjunction. If that is not so, subordinate clause, and the rest is the main clause. Now, many students, when they are asked, can you begin a sentence with a conjunction? They say no, but of course you can. You can say, when this lesson is finished, please won't you post any further questions for me to answer. You could say, before the next lesson, please would you write down what you remember of simple, compound, and complex sentences. You could write, although we are very stressed, we are grateful to Liberty for their support of educational programs to help us. You could write, if I have a problem, I will post a question on the Tenfold app. Now, each of these sentences is beginning with the subordinating conjunction. The comma is the end of the subordinate clause, because your rule is, if you have a subordinate, and these are all adverbial clauses, at the beginning of a sentence, you separate that clause off with a comma from the rest of the sentence. So you can have the subordinate clause first and the main clause at the end. I don't know why students have got it into their heads that every sentence must begin with the main clause. Now, if your sentence does have the main clause first and the subordinate clause or clauses afterwards, then it is structured in a particular way. You can see that it has a different structure if you have the subordinate clause first and the main clause at the end. And we call that a loose sentence And this one is a periodic sentence. The way I remember it is Americans call a period, a full stop, a period. So I remember when the main clause, the main part is at the end, it's a periodic sentence, it's a period. Okay, remember it any way you like. But the important thing here is I wanted to show you from a writer like Bessie Head that she mixes up the kinds of clauses and the lengths of the sentences. And that sometimes even she uses an and the second clause has could have vanished and she's just let that go and she's just got the essence of the clause. I wanted you to look at a piece of writing and look at how the clauses work in a piece of writing, as opposed to just doing what are main clauses, what are subordinate clauses, what are simple, compound, and complex sentences, because you are meant to vary them in the way that we saw Bessie Head does in that essay. And that is what markers are looking for in your writing, is to see a variety of sentence length, a variety of sentence structure in order to create a particular effect, and so that you don't have very boring sentence construction. And what a lot of students do is they just use and. So they will write an essay of 300 words that is one sentence with and all the way through to the end. And that is exceptionally worrying. So please, you need to look at the writing. Take whatever you are reading, a novel or a newspaper or the short stories, and look at how the sentences are structured so that you can then start to model variety of sentence length and variety of sentence construction for yourself. And you can see that sometimes a main clause can be really long with a little subordinate clause attached to it. That's what you're looking to do in your own writing.